and all profanities will be edited out.
Yeah.
Well done. Reach those feet up to the sky. Well done. Bring one foot down. That's it. Now slide those feet back and forward, but still keep that tongue going up. Then drop under. Bring those feet together. Now where are you looking? Look down here. Good. Bend the knees to your chest. Pulling your body out. Really soft landing. I'm stepping out. Good.
Hi, I'm Andrew Scott. I've had MS for over 20 years. I was diagnosed in 1993, but I've obviously had it for a long time before that. And this is how I use Pilates as part of the process of treating my MS symptoms, keeping me well. I don't think about MS. I know it's always there, but I don't think about it in the sense that it's some black cloud over the top of me. I don't think of it that way. It's more a case of if I chopped my leg off, I'd be aware that I chopped my leg off. MS is the same. It's just something that I just have to put up with. It doesn't define me as such, and in fact, it doesn't define me at all. My name's Andrew Scott. I'm 58 years old. When I was 56, I had a major MS attack. The primary effects is 2 chambers of my heart stopped beating. In addition to that, I lost the ability to walk, and I had to relearn how to walk again. It's not the first attack, it's not even the second attack. It's one of many, many attacks that I'd had. The very first attack I had was in 1993, and even that came after a series of smaller attacks that I didn't really notice. Since that second attack, I've recovered a great deal, and this is the story of how I actually beat that by using Pilates and a sensible approach to life. After my first attack, I had a gradual recovery. I had the traditional approach where I'd taken the intravenous cortisone. I then had subsequent smaller attacks, became eligible at that stage to use Avonex, which I started taking and I found very, very difficult to manage, but I still kept taking it. And I needed something more that would help me. I'd returned to work and somebody dropped a leaflet on my desk suggesting Pilates, which was something I knew absolutely nothing about. I assumed it was just a girl's exercise, and that's all I thought it was. I didn't think anything more of it. But I thought I should try, so I rang up the studio and I went down there and discovered it was anything but a basic form of exercise. In fact, it was exactly what I needed, because it isolated the muscles and it focused on movement, whereas the traditional forms of exercise are about going to the gym or aerobic workouts that are not appropriate for somebody with MS, particularly with some difficulty trying to manage the tightness that's going through their body, whereas Pilates allows you to concentrate on movement, concentrate on strengthening particular muscle groups, and gradually recovering. So we all know exercise is a really good idea, and we all have an attempt at some stage at doing exercise, and generally that fails. Occasionally you get onto something you particularly like and you keep at it. You may be a runner, you love running, so you keep doing that. You go to the gym, you repetitively do the same exercises. Pilates isn't quite like that. Pilates is all about focusing on movement, focusing on the ability to move individual muscles, to work little muscles, not just big muscles all the time, to get the best out of movement. Because fundamentally what gets taken away from you with MS is the freedom to move your whole body with some sense of being relaxed while you're going through that process. If you go into a gym and repetitively do whatever that exercise is to build up that muscle, that's not going to help you a great deal with MS. If you run and your whole body shakes as you're running, it's not going to help you while you're going through that process. You need to do something that's going to focus on those little muscles and make them work better. So when you go into a Pilates class, what you actually are exposed to is those little movements and those muscles that are required to control your entire body's function. If you just focus on the big muscles, you won't get to where you need to go. So when I went to Pilates, I was surprised straight away by how small the movements were. I thought they'd be big movements, but they weren't. And I discovered that my sense of range wasn't great. I discovered my strength wasn't as great as I thought it was. And I had to rebuild a lot of that ability to move with some suppleness. It just didn't come naturally. It was something I had to work on. So Pilates focuses on the same sorts of things that a dancer would think about. And a dancer's focused on movement. A dancer isn't focused on building strength as such. They're focused on moving with freedom and suppleness. And that's something that Pilates really delivers if you have something like MS, because you don't have that freedom of movement. So it's a matter of dealing with the tightness and getting the freedom back so you can move in a more normal fashion. The very first class, you actually feel a little bit small when you come out, as though I'm not as good as I thought I was. And the first class I was taught by a man, and he had come out of the Institute of Sport. He'd been an Olympic kayaker, and he drifted into it because he'd injured himself and had to recover from those injuries. So he found Pilates was the method. So it's quite confronting when you're asked to do something that looks simple and you can't do it. It's just too hard. And I think even you, as a normal man in the street, you'd say, my goodness, that's a lot harder than I expected it to be. So the very first class didn't focus on anything more than the very fundamental parts of it. It was how to breathe properly. You don't think about breathing in and breathing out, but whether you breathe in or breathe out has a big impact on how exercises work and whether they can work. So you have to think through it. You have to think about whether you're using your core muscles or whether you're just using some external gross muscles in order to move around. So you have to rethink how you move. So the first class was actually quite confronting because I didn't realise all the things that I didn't know until they were put in front of me and I had to think about it. Never ever. It actually becomes obsessive. It becomes a way of life. You can't think about giving it up because you know when you step away from it how quickly you start to feel worse. The thing about MS is that it doesn't go away as such. It's a matter of how you manage it. So if you decide I'm suddenly better, I will stop, then it won't work. And the other thing you get out of Pilates that you don't get anywhere else is that somebody's watching you. So you're not allowed to get through a series of exercises and make mistakes. You're not allowed to practice your mistakes. If you practice a mistake, you get nothing out of it. You've got to practice things correctly. And it's gradually that becomes part of the pattern of how you move and how you think about the actions that you undertake during a day, because you're trying to do it correctly, and eventually it becomes second nature. Definitely, it was really apparent to me when I had my second very large attack that that's a significant part of it. The problem when you have a very bad attack and that inflammation's running through your body is that it's not that you aren't in the moment, it's that you're in every moment. You're in every moment that ever happened and every moment that will happen. So when somebody's talking to you, you've got this problem of actually pushing aside all those other moments just to be in this moment. So when you're doing something like Pilates, where you're required just to focus on doing one thing, moving your arms or your legs or holding your body in a certain position or following a certain pattern of movement, you're forced to forget about what used to happen or what might happen and just be in the moment. So it has a significant impact of calming you down. It's like a Zen effect. You actually are in the moment rather than being in every moment, and that makes a huge difference.
And I think that links to, if you are going to do Pilates, finding a practitioner that you feel comfortable with is really important, because if you don't feel comfortable going and seeing someone, you're not going to go and do it. So if you meet someone to begin with and you think, it's not quite right, maybe persevere. If it's still not right, try someone else, because I think that connection with your instructor is so important, so that you can achieve the benefits going forward. I know with Andrew, I can yell at him across the room in a nice way to tell him, you're doing it right, you're not doing it right, focus, concentrate.
And I'll yell back.
And there's good interaction in being able to achieve the goals that you're trying to get to in Pilates, and also building up a trust between, say, Andrew and myself, or the client and the Pilates practitioner. If that trust doesn't develop, it's harder to push the individual. And I think Andrew trusts me, so that I can see when he's starting to get somewhere, or we need to move you a bit further out of your comfort zone. You trust the instructor to take you there, and I think that's really important. So find someone that you feel comfortable with, inspires you, and you can feel that you can trust is also important, not just doing the exercises.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, because it's actually it's a teamwork process. You need that small class. You can have 4 people in a class and still make it work. One-on-one is great, but you can make it work with 4. But ultimately, it's got to be a teamwork process. Unfortunately, in this situation, I'm just the person who needs to be worked on, but I'm not made of glass, so you can't see inside me and see what's tight. So I have to say where my problems actually are. I have to say, I'm too tight here, my legs are a bit tight, my back's sore, my neck's sore. I have to say that, and then Sarah has to look at me and say, I don't care that you say your legs are out. You're not going to get to where you need to be unless you do the following exercises and work your way through it. And sometimes it doesn't always apparently appear to me that she's picked the right exercise, but invariably she has. It's just that my impression on the inside is I'm worried about where I'm a bit sore, but she's worried about what I look like, how I move, whether I can actually get to where I need to go, whether I've warmed up the muscles that need to be warmed up before I can get to the bit that I'm complaining about. It's only going to work if it's teamwork, so we actually have to act like I'm the project. I can give her the feedback on what's wrong with me. She has to tell me with the expertise that she's got where I should go and what I should do to get there. And you absolutely have to trust her, and that's the only way it works. And so we occasionally disagree. But
we have a good debate about
yeah.
what we think is the next exercise to do that's going to be beneficial.
Yeah. And we don't always agree, but nearly all the time we do.
That's true. So when I first met Andrew, I was a new instructor to the studio where Andrew was currently doing Pilates. And I think by that time, you'd been doing Pilates maybe for
close to 10 years.
Close to 10 years.
Yeah.
And I walked in and I see this man hanging upside down. I think it was the first time I saw you. And he's hanging upside down off, his feet are in these loops and he's hanging down, and we're having a conversation. And I think now I call Andrew Batman, because he just loves to hang for the traction in his spine. And I took over the group that Andrew was in at the studio, and the instructor before had said, on paper, Andrew Scott, MS sufferer for a long time. And I immediately thought, worst case. So when I walked in the room and saw you doing what I would consider really quite advanced exercises, I thought, wow, this man's really focused, this man doesn't look sick to me, surely there's nothing wrong.
And then you told me how long you had been doing Pilates for, and that made sense. You could see there was an understanding in Andrew's body. There was a thought process between every movement he made, and was willing to open up his, I suppose, his body and his vulnerabilities that came with that to a new instructor, and allow me in to take him through my style of Pilates and what I thought he needed. And from then on, I think, yeah, I opened myself up to you. You actually opened yourself up as a client to take on new exercises that you hadn't done before. Even though I walked in and saw Andrew doing, you know, one of the most advanced exercises, I pulled him right back to basics on day one. I was like, I need to see how this man moves and see where you're at. And I think we ended the session, I'll never forget the day, I think I ended up sitting on you.
Yeah, you did.
To bring your arms overhead and open you up. So, and I think I'm not the first instructor to do that. So it was a really nice moment to see and be surprised by someone who had invested their time and energy and commitment to Pilates. If no one had said Andrew had MS, I would not have known. It was quite inspiring.
It's fun having somebody sit on you.
It does make sense. I think with any client that comes into the studio, you have to remember what their circumstance is and what their injury is, because with MS there are going to be certain things you need to watch out for. I know often, and I often say to Andrew, like, fatigue is an issue, and if I see Andrew profusely sweating or really getting his energy up, I need to keep that in mind. It comes back to that dialogue with the individual. He'll go, no, actually I'm feeling all right, and then we can push on. So with any clients, and even with Andrew, he's moving really well, but you have to keep the injury or the MS at the forefront of your mind, so that you know that what you're going to give them next is working towards that goal, and you're just being aware of any signals that you go, oh, is this actually the right thing, or am I doing the right thing? You don't want to do harm. So I think it is always there, but there are often times where you move so well now that, and I feel comfortable with the relationship that you build, that I can actually leave that almost to Andrew now, of him coming back to me and saying, hey, I'm not feeling good, actually this movement's really just sort of aggravating here, this is where I'm tight, and I can just treat you like a really healthy person. So I think you've probably got a point of view on that, but I hope that there is a moment where you get to go, I'm just moving and I'm not really thinking about my MS. I am just here and I'm focusing on movement. But as the instructor, I'm watching out for any symptoms or signs that I think, okay, don't want to overdo it here, don't want to cause harm. So hopefully that allows you to free your mind of everything that you're dealing with outside of this room, and just focus on the movement at hand, and give me the responsibility to kind of keep the MS signs and symptoms at front of mind.
I suppose I don't think about MS. I know it's always there, but I don't think about it in the sense that it's some black cloud over the top of me. I don't think of it that way. It's more a case of if I chopped my leg off, I'd be aware that I'd chopped my leg off. MS is the same. It's just something that I just have to put up with. It doesn't define me as such. In fact, it doesn't define me at all. But the thing you learn over a very long period of time, and Sarah's the best instructor I've ever had, but some instructors have a bias in them where You know, they're really good with their legs, so that you get too many leg exercises, or they're very good with their arms, so you get a lot of upper body exercises, or they've got some other issue that they focus on, whereas Sarah tends to work right through the whole body, and you get a complete workout right through the process. And through all of that, I never think, oh gee, I've got MS, what am I going to do today? I never ever think about that at all. I think, have I done this right? Have I landed the foot correctly? Have I moved myself properly? Sometimes I get grumpy because I'm a bit tight in the torso, and I think, well, I'm not doing a very good job doing this particular exercise, and then she'll correct me, and things can sometimes get better simply by being corrected. So that can happen, but I never think that I've got MS when I'm doing this. I think I've got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 ears, 2 eyes. If somebody else can do it, why can't I do it? That's all I think about. I never ever think about, gee, I can't do this. Never ever.
And you touched on a good point with Pilates, and especially my philosophy with Pilates is it's whole body integration. So it's all about the little muscles that work in the body to move our bones, which you touched on earlier, but it's actually how do you integrate that into your body. And it may be that tightness in your back is affecting the way your hip moves and being able to lift the leg and walk. So I think what's really important and what we do in our sessions is we make sure we work right from the toes all the way up through to the top of the head and every part of the body in between, so that we're not just focusing on that one sore bit. Often when Andrew walks in, I just want to work on my shoulder, it's really tight through here, and I effectively ignore you and I say, well, that's fine, but we're going to work on the whole body today, and the shoulder's going to be part of that, but your shoulder is connected to your spine is connected to your legs, and everything is connected. So that's what we're going to do. You have to do it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of tough love, and you have to suck it up and accept it. Yeah, well, working out how to walk was terribly important. I think if you break it down, it doesn't matter how you go about trying to release muscles. It could be through Botox injections, it could be through magnesium, it could be through baclofen, it could be through Dantrium, it could be through any other form of exercise. If you release those muscles, they're weak because you're relying on that tightness that's through your body to carry you around. If you are suddenly weak, you need Pilates to actually strengthen all those muscles so you can actually operate more normally. There's no point releasing muscles and then sitting in a chair and saying I'm going to get better, because you're not. You actually have to use all the muscles in your body all the time, and that makes everyday movement so much easier to manage because suddenly you're stronger where previously you weren't.
And Pilates is a really good tool for that, because the whole theory of science behind Pilates is strength with flexibility. So rather than a gym exercise, and we used to call the bicep curl, it's all about shortening the muscle to build strength. So that's going to tighten you more. Whereas in Pilates, it's about building strength in the lengthened state of the muscle. So rather than contracting all the muscles and making you feel tight, it's actually building that strength with the muscle in an elongated, flexible state. So it's giving you more efficient movement. It's combining, and I'm never going to be able to pronounce all the few drugs that you take for the flexibility of their muscle, but we have actually noticed when you've trialed a few of those different drugs, the muscles go lax and you lose movement. And so then in the studio we're working on keeping that strength so that you can continue to move the muscles in the right way, to walk, to do your stairs, to go walk the dogs. Everything that you do is about keeping the muscle in balance. Too much strength and no flexibility is going to be restricted movement. Too much flexibility and not enough strength, you won't be able to move. So it's that combination of keeping the strength with the flexible muscle.
Yeah. I had been reasonably well for some time. I'd known Sarah at that stage for maybe 12 months, 18 months?
18 months
18
probably.
months. And I felt everything was fine. And she was the first person to see the discomfort I actually had, because I walked into the studio and she said, "What's wrong with you?" Whereas nobody else actually noticed that I'd become very rigid and I found it difficult to walk. So she was the first one to notice. But what had actually happened to me is I'd developed a severe tightening through the intercostal muscles, and my rib cage was being pulled in and getting tighter and tighter and tighter. It got into such a spasm that 2 chambers of my heart stopped beating. So I was functioning on half a heart, and I was finding it increasingly difficult to move. In a moment of madness, I decided I should go to the hospital. So I took a tram to the hospital, where they admitted me, put me into cardiology, got my heart restarted. I was at risk of heading towards a pacemaker, but I got restarted. And then they put me on to cortisone intravenously again, and I then discovered I couldn't walk. So I could shuffle, but I couldn't walk. So then I had to go into the rehabilitation process in the hospital as an and their equipment really was pretty crude, and their approach was very basic. They were better at road trauma victims than they were at somebody with a neurological problem. But they had identified some of the issues, and Sarah saw what their diagnosis was, and then she used a far more sophisticated approach to begin to rebuild me, which started as really basic things: walking me around the block, walking me up and down stairs, telling me I had to walk without hanging on to things, all of those issues. And then I began a series of exercises designed to rebuild my ability to move, which were exercises like jumping while you're lying down, so you're moving on a board, going backwards and forwards, and lifting the legs up where I didn't want to lift them up, and moving through ranges that stretched my torso. Just basically all the simple things that were involved in rebuilding that flexibility that I'd completely lost. And that's taken time. It's taken nearly 2 years.
You're pretty good now.
Depends what you
But
compare
not
me
give
to.
you too much credit.
Yes.
Yeah, so when it happened, I saw Andrew in the studio that day, and I think it was about halfway through the session, and I think we may have stopped it. I think it was quite obvious that something wasn't quite right, and the work we were doing in here was actually, it wasn't helping, and you quickly took yourself home to the hospital, and I got the phone call, and I went and saw Andrew in hospital, and it was a shock. It was a shock to see Andrew as a seemingly healthy, normal individual, is what I would consider you. Despite MS, we don't really talk about that too much. To seeing you in hospital and having really lost that movement in your legs. You had lost your balance, so even standing upright was a challenge. So I then, to get a better understanding of what had happened to Andrew and the rehabilitation approach that the physiotherapists in the hospital had suggested, I attended a few of your rehabilitation sessions at the hospital, and it was very simple work of trying to re-educate you to walk, but what was lacking was the how. I think the physiotherapists and medical profession, as good as they were able to say, well, we want you to do this, but there was no education of the body of, well, how do I do that? Or how do I do the little things to get me there? And I think that's where Pilates became very obvious that Pilates was a great tool to do that, because we could break exercises down and use the equipment in the studio to assist you to find those muscles. And we did start. Our first Pilates session was not even Pilates. It was holding on to the railing of the steps at the studio and we spent an hour, one step at a time, me holding on to you. We went forwards, we went backwards, we went sideways, and then I made you do it on your own, and we could do that on your own. I think the next couple of sessions we went for walks around the block, and they were slow, and I would yell at you to stop swinging your leg,
All the
and
time.
we'd focus on lifting the knee up and walking. So it was actually, I'd say those first few sessions post the attack were more an education of gait movement before we even got into the studio to then go, all right, so we've been walking, we've done some stairs. You can feel what's not working, what you need to work. Let's now try and find it in the studio using the equipment. And your body responded really well, and you got frustrated that you couldn't do the things that you used to be able to do. And it's been a really nice journey to see Andrew now be able to do all those things that you can do. Not only did you lose the ability to really walk, you lost the feeling in your hands. So that was something else we had to work on, was without the feeling in your hands, how did we maintain gripping strength? How did we maintain movement even though you couldn't feel? And that was a trust thing, because you couldn't feel. I was sort of your sensation for you in doing those movements. And now I'd say you're back where you were before the attack.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Probably,
even
yeah.
better.
Yeah. And that's where it comes down to. You absolutely have to rely on the Pilates instructor. She's your eyes. She's your brain for a while. She actually teaches you to do everything the way you're supposed to do it, not in a mistaken fashion. You have to do it correctly. You can't afford to make mistakes, so you can't practice your mistakes. You have to make it the right way all the time. You need somebody looking at you, showing you what to do. But above all, she becomes your friend, because you need that trust in somebody that you have to rely on. Your family members won't give it to you. The people you used to work with won't give it to you. You have to have somebody who's actually guiding your body around and showing you where you should be and what you're supposed to be doing. And that's a relearning experience. Like, I may as well have been an 18-month-old baby learning how to walk. Somebody had to hold my hands and show me how to do it the right way. There's no point in doing it the wrong way, and that's where it becomes invaluable. You really need that connection. I may not have been here at all, or I may have been, if I'd followed the way I think the medical people were talking, I may have been in a wheelchair. In fact, I probably would have been in a wheelchair. I would have had a very sad life. I would have had a very, very confused life. I'd have lost my sense of ambition. I would have become very insular, because that's the direction you're heading in. You actually suddenly find how isolated you are, because you can't explain where you are to anybody. You're on your own. There's no way that other people can possibly understand what's actually happened to you. Your brain's addled, your body feels terrible, you can't do the things you should be able to do. You need to focus somewhere, and I found Sarah in particular, for that whole Pilates approach, lets me focus on one thing at a time and do one thing right, and then gradually build it up from there. So what used to be only one thing that I could do becomes one of many things that I could do.
That can be in the blooper.